All right, we are going to try this again. This is about my fifth attempt because my computer memory was full. So hopefully this will work, but I am probably going to speed it up a little bit so I don't overdo my memory one more time. So we're going to watch the video.
Playing. A black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And they told the teachers, their subjects, watch the video, there may be some challenging behaviors. As soon as you see something that could become challenging, hit the enter key on your keypad. Well, here's the trick. There was no challenging behavior. The researchers were using eye scan technology to see which child the teachers were looking at the most. And what they found is that the teachers, both white and black alike, spent the most time watching the black boy, waiting for bad behavior that never came. There's one more really interesting headline in this study, which comes later. The teachers were also given a one-paragraph description to read of a hypothetical child with a stereotypical name who behaves pretty badly in class, pushes, scratches, throws toys. And some of the teachers were also given some biographical information that helped make sense of that behavior. They were told that the child lives with his mother, father has been in and out for years, they're relatively poor, the mother is depressed, works 3 jobs. The researchers wanted to know if knowing this information made the teachers more empathetic to the kid. Well, here's the shock. It did, but only if the teacher and the child were of the same race. If the teacher and the child, a white teacher and a black child, or even a black teacher and a white child, knowing that biographical information, those teachers were less empathetic towards those students. And here's why this matters. Imagine if this is true, if there's this empathy deficit in preschool, well, imagine where else that's true.
So yeah, a lot to think about there. We don't like to think about the fact that this could apply to us in our works so closely, but obviously it does. And so this is just that was an example specifically related to behavior, which we know is an issue. We talked about that last semester in Teach 314, but we also know that this goes across many other layers as well. And so as we're thinking about this, putting this together with deficit perspectives, um, deficit perspectives is, of course, assuming that for whatever reason, some children, because of genetic, cultural, racial, and whatever differences, are inferior to others. And I feel like all of us would say, well, we would never do that, right? Not explicitly, but sometimes we do implicitly have some of these thoughts and assumptions about children. And furthermore, as this points out, some school policies and practices actually, sort of promote this in a way. And so in the text, they talk on pages 216 and 217 about some of the issues related to suspension and expulsion, issues related to bias, and how we can become more aware so that we can reframe the way that we think. And so sometimes when we, like I said earlier, that point where we pause, like we have this judgment that comes in, and maybe we see a situation, and initially our thought is the child's father's in prison, the mother is overwhelmed. So that's where we could stop and pause. And deficit thinking says, no wonder he's a mess. A more strength-based approach would be acknowledging that the child, that everybody has challenges, whatever. And so that we can reframe that. And when we hear that the child's father is in prison, the mother is completely overwhelmed, we don't put the onus back on that student. We say, how can I support this child and their family? And so it's really that point where we have that information, we pause, and we reframe it in a different perspective. So this may be something that hopefully none of us think, but some people out there might think. Some children will never be able to learn like other children. That's it. Some people might think of things like, I don't think there's anything I can do to fix this child. Well, there's so many things in that quote that make me cringe. Or things like, if the parents valued education, the world would succeed. Look at Anna's family. They come to school every day and she has no behavioral issues. So all of these things can be reframed in different ways. And so as we are moving through the rest of chapter 6 and into the rest of the content across the whole course, be thinking about times when you might, some of these negative deficit thoughts might be creeping in, and how we can shift our thinking to be more positive and have more of a strengths-based approach. Before we wrap up chapter 6, what was it that I wanted to read here? So a key takeaway for me is that our journey, our own personal journey in education, must begin with learning about ourselves and valuing our culture, because that then opens the door for us to be able to value, appreciate, and explore other people's cultures as well. And so now, as we move into chapter 7, this is where we move into the part of the textbook that's really focused less on awareness and our own awareness of ourselves and others, and more into the skills that we need to be a better and stronger multicultural teacher. And so in chapter 7, we explore how we can do this through our curriculum and lesson planning. And in chapter 8, we talk about specifically some instructional strategies that we can use. And so in chapter 7, we explore a lot about curriculum. So our curriculum is really focused on what we teach. And in some cases, we may not have a lot of control over what goes into our curriculum. The textbook says a curriculum is the master plan or the blueprint for listing the courses that a school district feels that support state and national standards, and the content of what the district feels an educated student should learn. And so what we know about curricula is that historically, there have been a lot of issues with representation within the different curriculum. And this is a huge hot topic right now in our world, of course, with everything that's happening politically, and how we are even more than ever politicizing education for better or worse. And so I wanted to just point you to a few things in chapter 7. There's a lot of great information, well, in all the chapters, but thinking about specifically about the curriculum that is used within the school, if you have an opportunity to be part of selecting a curriculum in your school, or really thinking through what it is that you're teaching and how you're teaching it, these are some things for you to kind of take a look for. So on page 240, there's actually a checklist that you can use to examine resources for bias. And that's a great tool that you can use for anything, a textbook, a curriculum, even children's books. You can use that checklist for. And in addition to that, on pages 237 through 239, they talk about different ways that bias shows up within curriculum materials, things like invisibility or omission. So it's not necessarily about who you're seeing represented in the curriculum, but it's more about who you're not seeing represented in the curriculum. So historically, women, people of color, marginalized groups are not typically well represented within different curricula. Also, things like stereotyping, This can really come into play with, sort of talking about how boys should learn or what girls should learn or what's, that, everyone who is from Asian descent is really good at math or whatever. All of those things are stereotypes, and even positive stereotypes are sometimes still damaging. Thinking about things like imbalance and selectivity. So, whose perspective is really shown within the curriculum? So, is there a representation of what slavery really looked like in history in the United States? Or have we sort of picked out the parts that we want to share that make it seem like it really wasn't that bad? That's an example of imbalance or selectivity. Unreality, sometimes, and this is happening right now, the truth is simply not included. That's more of what's talked about in 3, but in others, it's just simply that the truth is not included, in that what is included is a lie. And so the example of this is that they give in the textbook is about, how we had, the Japanese internment camps during World War II, and how that's misrepresented and often historically inaccurately represented within history books. And so that's another example of that. So looking through all of those different examples can really help us to better understand what to look for when we're selecting a curriculum, if we have the option to do that with our work. Now, what we almost always have the ability to make changes with is our lesson planning. So the second part of Chapter 7 is all about how we are writing multicultural lesson plans. And so the first step in this is getting to know your students. As I said at the beginning of this module, the best way that we can be a truly multicultural teacher is to represent the culture of our students in our classroom, in our lessons, in our curriculum, in the materials that we have within the classroom. And so if we know the background, the culture, the language, the learning styles of our students, that then helps us to be able to differentiate for those differences within our students and really embed some of those more critical multicultural perspectives. So things like making sure that we are culturally competent and that we are including a variety of different materials. And not that it's not always about representation, but it's also about addressing, confronting, and even standing up to issues of racism, sexism, prejudice, discrimination within our teaching. You wouldn't think that that comes up all that often in early childhood, but this is when children are forming their thoughts and opinions and beliefs about other people and what they believe about other people, what they believe, because children are curious. They want to know, why does that person's skin color look different than mine? Why does that person wear glasses and I don't? Why does that person have to use a wheelchair and I don't? So they have lots and lots of questions. And the way that we respond can have a huge impact on how they then see the world around them. So we want to be clear and conscious about the ways that we are embedding things intentionally within our curriculum and our lesson planning. Can you tell I'm talking fast now? Because I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time again. You're probably thrilled. Anyway, so Chapter 8 is all about the instructional strategies that we use. And this is, again, more personal to us. And in this chapter, you'll be invited to explore and reflect on how you teach. How did you learn how to teach the way that you teach, right? So you're going through this program, you're early in this program, and you're going to learn a lot of new things. But you also, almost all of you have been teaching for quite some of you for a very long time. And so when you reflect on how you teach, why you teach the way that you do, and how your teaching has evolved over time, those are all really deeply rooted in your education, in your experiences, possibly in the workplace where you're at, your life experiences as well. So in this course, we really are hoping, I'm hoping that, and through the work that we do, that you open yourself up to different perspectives, to thinking a little bit differently, to think about not only how and why you teach the way that you teach right now, and how has that changed over time, but really thinking about what do you want to change and shift, and what are your goals for yourself as a teacher in the future, and how are you embedding the language, the culture, the beliefs of your students within those teaching models that you hope to use in the future. So chapter 8 works all through those different things, takes us deeper into differentiated instruction, things like responsive teaching and having more of a responsive classroom. So lots of different strategies that we can use to be a stronger, better teacher for all of our students. So that is where we are going to wrap up for this module. Next module is our last one, believe it or not, where we work through the last 4 chapters of the textbook. And as always, if you have questions about anything, if there's something that you're unaware of or unsure of, you please feel free to reach out to me through email, and I will be in touch with you very soon. I look forward to reading your discussions. I also look forward to seeing your autobiographical representations and looking at and reading those. I hope you all are having a great day.